everyone, and welcome back. There are really three key market segments within the solar industry: the residential segment, the commercial and industrial segment, and the utility scale segment. The segments are really differentiated by where the solar panels are installed. As you can see, residential, usually on residences or around it, commercial or industrial, either on the commercial property or around it, and then utility scale, which is usually in a large barren farmland or a distance away from a city center or an area where the power would be used. Now, although all three of the segments are in the business of generating power, there are some key differences between each of the different segments that makes them unique. It's good for you to understand what these key differences are, because now that we've learned how power is generated and where solar power fits within the energy infrastructure, these key differences are going to help you understand how you can operate in each of the different sectors, whether residential, commercial, or utility scale. You'll also learn, if you operate across all three of those segments, what the key differences are, so you can make those necessary changes to succeed in each of the different areas. To kick it off, the residential solar industry usually consists of systems that are approximately about 10 kilowatts in size. These systems are usually installed on top of the roof of a house, if not in a side yard or a backyard around it. The power most generally flows to the house or to the electricity grid. These systems are often purchased by the homeowner through some sort of financing agreement, but in some cases, the roof can also be leased out to a solar developer, or purchase can be purchased through a power purchase agreement. Residential solar is extremely popular in the United States and is growing in popularity globally. An example of a residential solar developer would be Tesla Energy, which was previously called Solar City. The second segment is commercial and industrial solar. Commercial and industrial solar installations are usually on top of a business. So this can be on top of a shopping plaza or some sort of manufacturing facility on the rooftop, or it can be in a barren area or farmland beside an operating business. An example of this can be a large manufacturing facility such as a GM or an automotive plant, which has a big piece of land around it and they pull the power into it. The key difference, though, in the commercial and industrial is, first of all, the size is much larger, usually much greater than 10 kilowatts, and can go almost as large as 2 megawatts. Now, one of the key differences, as I was mentioning, is that in the commercial and industrial space, businesses rarely want to spend to own the solar systems that are powering their businesses. They will most likely prefer that the developer either leases the system to them or provides some sort of financing, or there's a power purchase agreement in which they buy the power directly. There's also the opportunity where the building owner doesn't necessarily, or the business owner doesn't necessarily care for the power that's being generated. They may just lease the rooftop space or the land that they own so that somebody else can install solar panels on them and then sell that power back to the grid. So they may only be interested in the lease revenue that they can generate from the solar panels. Often, if they are generating the electricity for their business, they can reduce their operational costs. And the commercial and industrial segment, although growing, is not as popular as the residential or utility scale solar segment. There's some challenges within this segment, as there are a lot of compliance issues with regards to structural on the top of buildings, and also lots of municipal issues with having solar generally in a farmland or a solar garden within a town. So these are things that need to be overcome. This is definitely a growing sector, but a harder sector to succeed in. This is an example of a commercial installation. This is specifically a barn on a farm that had solar panels installed on top of it. Now, the final and third market segment we want to discuss is the utility scale segment. Well, utility scale segment, just to be put out front, is really large scale solar. It's usually above 2 megawatts, and the power is usually generated and sold directly into the utility grid. If not, in some rare cases, the power is sold directly into a town or a specific business that needs that power. These farms are usually found on deserts or unused agricultural lands, or can be found also in wastelands, or such as garbage dumps. Now, within these models, what's happening is that the utilities usually sign power purchase agreements with a developer to purchase the power at a specific price. Now, there are usually some significant environmental approvals that are required and significant geotechnical requirements that must be met for these installations. Here's an example of a utility scale farm. As you can see, they're quite large. Actually, these are large enough that you can actually usually have trucks that go and drive between the rows. The grass actually also has to be maintained. The areas all around the farm must be maintained once the installation is done. They're usually pretty neat. If you get a chance, do check them out in person. Now, we also want to introduce one other, which is not really a market segment, but it's really a growing area within the solar industry, which is the microgrid and off-grid. This is usually installations occurring in a house that's not connected or a cottage that's not connected to the grid. These installations are usually solar panels coupled with battery storage. But this can also be villages that currently operate on diesel power that now require that now have solar power on them and battery storage. So installations on these usually vary by greatly dependent on the size. And the biggest hurdle in their implementation is, again, as mentioned, the energy storage and the batteries technology. Just to summarize quickly, we learned about the 3 different key market segments. We learned about the residential segment, which is about 10 kilowatts and is usually installed on top of houses. We learned that residential homeowners usually prefer to finance and own the system or do some sort of lease back from the developer. We learned about the commercial industrial segment, which is usually on a large business or a manufacturing facility. We learned that commercial business owners generally do not like to own the solar system, but rather prefer just to buy that power through a power purchase agreement or to lease the area to the developer. We learned about utility scale solar, which is usually large, usually greater than 2 megawatts, but can be even start off at about 1 megawatt in size. And then we also learned about microgrid, which is really a grid that includes solar and battery storage that's not directly connected to the central grid. Now, one key mention I'd like to make at this point is that when we talk about solar at the commercial, industrial, and the residential level, it's important to understand the concept of generating power where it's being used. So which is interesting in these two is that the power is not being transported far away. Wherever we're generating that power, whether it's on top of a shopping building or on top of a house, it's usually being used in the vicinity around it. And this is part of something called distributed generation. We'll learn about this later on throughout our sections. Hope you learned tons during that section, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.